Yes.
I feel like we grew up together.
That's true.
We've grown up and we've grown old and we've done a lot of things, but you have accomplished so much in your career. And so as you introduce yourself, because there's a lot about you on the NCAP website, but you get to choose this time as we open this interview, what it is you might like to say about who you are and what you've done, because you are a legacy figure and it's too much for me to cover. So jump right in.
It feels odd to be called a legacy, although I know that as I was approaching my retirement, I thought very much as we've talked about, retirement is just not having a job. It's not necessarily not being involved.
Right.
And so I am continuing to participate. But I think my proudest accomplishment in my years in the field has been Kinship Center. The gathering of such extraordinary people, the partnership with Carol Biddle, all the work that we did to change and improve policy and procedure and practice, that really for me was the highlight of my career. Before that was everything that led up to that. I think what I learned from you all those years when I was at Children's Home Society,
Yeah.
and being able to really see what was right, whether or not it was acceptable.
Wow. Yeah.
There's so many things in practice that were wrong. And as we learned that we could do things differently, figuring out how to change the rules so that we could do what was best for kids. And I think that was, that 39 years was really the bulk of my career and what I'm so proud of. And then the other thing that I was really proud of that I am proud of, is that so many young people came through that organization. So many young people who found that they loved the work, that they loved the family, that they loved the feeling of benefiting kids and families, and that they went on to continue their education, that they went back to school, and that I felt like I was part of helping to mentor them, to give them courage to continue and to strive for more. And that, at my retirement party, was so fun. So many of the young staff who had left came to the retirement party, and they said, "We want a picture with you. We want a photo with you." There's this great photograph of all these young folks.
Wow.
And me, and I felt like a grandma,
Yeah.
a proud grandma.
Yeah.
And so when I think about all of the young people who've gone on to do such wonderful things, that they got so much great training and insight and learning from Kinship Centers, that was really heartwarming to me.
So Kinship Center started really in the Monterey Bay area of California, and it became really a statewide agency. Can you reflect for a minute on what were some of the issues that weren't right for children that you were able to shift so that children could be better served? What bothered you in the early days of that agency building experience?
Well, secrecy. That was a big thing, and a lot of the openness that I learned from you, that I learned from you and from other mentors, about what the damage what damage is done by secrecy, and what benefits there are to openness, and to helping everybody heal from the experience of adoption, which has, as you have always said, loss at the center.
Yeah.
And so I think we did a lot to help change policy to allow for that to be the standard of care and the standard of practice. And I think there were just small things that legislation that came up. After Graham left CAAA, or was no longer the legislative chair, I took that on. And I have learned a lot.
CAAA means what?
California Association of Adoption Agencies.
Uh-huh.
And so, it was really helpful to be able to understand what the issues were when legislation came up. And I had people I could call on to help write letters, like Adam Pertman, who wrote to the governor, and on things like safe surrender babies. And, there were many policies and many legislative proposals that came up that we opposed. So I think, I learned more and more what I could do to have a voice. And that was good for me, because I tend to want to be in the background, and that allowed me to step forward and have a voice. So I think we made differences because our own agency had different practice, and that we began to spread that. I mean, everybody who worked within Kinship Center was creative and innovative and figured out how to get around the rules, which is not politically correct to say, but it was true.
It's right. It's what earned it several federal excellence awards.
Right. And the curriculum, the ACT curriculum, was the real was groundbreaking. And we were able to disseminate that everywhere. You traveled all over the country to teach and to mentor, and even Canada's still using it. And, several other wonderful opportunities we've had to innovate that. And other curricula have come up, but I mean, I think that was the first one, and it was the foundation that inspired other people to say, oh, we really do need to start educating our staff in things that are adoption connected and permanency connected, because that training wasn't available.
No, and it was and still is a 48-hour training that's active here in California and Canada, et cetera. But you also replicated it in a really interesting way by making sure that not only the social workers had the training, but that the families themselves were using the same language, so that professionals and families could help each other address the needs of children. And I think that in itself was very innovative.
Yes, I agree. I mean, it really was, and it was due to the creativity of the folks who we brought together that happened. Well, we're speaking a language, and our families aren't speaking that language if they don't have the training after we train them to, after we give them the support to move to either an adoption or guardianship or permanency for relatives, as well as unrelated families. And it was, this makes sense. Why don't we just do this? So I think that creativity was what I felt so gratified by, having helped to create that culture.
Well, I think the thing that reminds me most of Kinship Center's development is the fact that money wasn't the moving force. Services were, and somehow the money could be found. And I think that's an upside down thought for many folks who might be watching somebody who formed an agency out of a need, and then said, let's always focus on what needs to be done, and somehow we'll find the money to do it. I still think that's a very rare perspective in this country. And the other thing that I really hold you in such high regard for, Carol, is your group work. I mean, you really ran some long-term, incredibly potent groups for your clients. I wonder if you might want to talk about that.
Well, the one that was the longest running, I mean, there were groups that, had a beginning and an end, or and had a particular purpose. But the one that ran the longest was my birth parent and adoptee support group, which started in 1985, year after we started the agency. and actually it moved to an online. Now we have an online group when I retired.
Wow. And you're still leading that?
Well, it's really not led anymore. It's just everybody who wants to post can post, and people respond. But it times had changed. People were getting different kinds of support online and in different ways. So we had a really strong core group, but it seemed time to morph into something different. But it lasted a long time, and we really supported. In fact, we just got an email from a young woman who I remember very well, who found out that she was adopted when she was an adult and came to the group. And that was 20 years ago. And she just emailed the agency and said, I'm working on my will, and I'd like to leave something to Kinship Center. I want to thank Carol Bishop and Lois Lesser for all of their support in helping me get through a very trying time when I found out that I was adopted as an adult. And I thought, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So after somebody else is going to contact her about that, but I'm going to also respond to her and thank her for thinking of us and ask how she's doing. And so, I mean, if people come back, it's really quite amazing, because I've been there such a long time. They know how to find me.
And that's I think one of the positives, Carol, for those folks who stayed in the field for a long time, is they became ongoing touchstones for the clients that an agency served. So when you have a lot of turnover, that doesn't always happen. That accessibility doesn't always happen. And I wonder, in terms of those groups that you led so long, are there some messages for people watching this, things that you learned that you want to just say, these are the things that came out of that long-term group that I want you to know?
Well, that particular long-term group was, really educating for me. My husband was adopted by one parent. And so I was close to some of the issues that he was dealing with, but this was just such a variety of experiences that really helped me when I was working with birth parents who were considering adoption and doing the actual, on the ground work. It gave me a very different perspective, because I had the down the road perspective.
Yes.
From so many of the group members, and especially the folks who were adopted, the questions that they had and the searching that they were doing, and it really taught me.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, and I helped to facilitate the group, but I didn't lead the group. I facilitated the group in that I made sure that everybody had a voice and listened, but I'd let them help each other.
Yeah.
And when I could add something, then I would add something, but I didn't want to interfere with their process because they had the experience to support each other.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's the kind of group that you don't insert yourself too heavily.
That's good advice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Two other things pop up for me, Carol. One is the really unique camp that continues to go with a county partnering, a public-private partnership where families who are serving children with some additional challenges can come together with a very talented staff. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the camp and why it felt important to you.
Well, thank you for starting it, because you created it. And I was able to be mentored by you for the first few years that we did that here. And then when you decided that it was not something you wanted to continue to do, I stepped in. And I just think it's such a unique opportunity for families to be with other families who do understand how their family works. And and what issues come up for them. And the kids have the opportunity to be with other kids who are adopted or are within a family where adoption has been a part of building the family. And I think that it's a unique experience for a lot of them because they have friends who don't really understand what's happening in their family if they don't have a common experience. And, you know, the intensity isn't apparent until the end of camp. You know, people come and they come to camp, but they find that as the day goes on and as, you know, the days go on, that by Sunday they've formed attachments with other families. They've learned so much from their own workshops and the trust that they've had that other people are taking care of their kids. And that the kids have the opportunity, especially the teens, to really connect with other kids who understand their experience because they have the same shared experience. I remember the one year that we had an equal number of kids who were adopted as kids who were biologically were born into the family of the teens. And it was hilarious. They did a Family Feud skit. And it was very funny. It was very honest. And it was very funny. But it was, you know, it opened their eyes too, you know, to each other's sensibility in terms of being a part of a blended family. So, I mean, there were so many moments. It's hard to, you know, pick any one, but such gratitude from the families, and they come back year after year. They want to keep coming back.
And the fact that the county government pays for it every year is, I think, still quite unique and remarkable. And I know that you took that camp experience and codified it, which was, you know, so necessary. You're such a fine writer. And so you were able to pull the details of that together. And I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, I wrote a guidebook because I knew as I was retiring that I wasn't going to be running unless they wanted to contract with me. But it's a lot of work, as you know. And so I wrote a guidebook and with 48 attachments. I mean, it's just, you know, massive. But it has you know, it felt good to put it down, you know, to really do step by step. And you had started that, you know, so I took what you started and then, you know, really was able to embellish it because camp has changed some over the years.
Yes, and needs to. Things do need to change, and people watching this really need to be aware of evolution and what they can do to help things evolve. I think that's part of our job. And the other thing that I think Kinship Center has done uniquely well is that its board is, you know, that the boards that are attached to the different offices are more than just board members that sit there with management issues. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how involved the local boards have been with the actual growth and caring of the families and children that the agency serves.
Well, you know, before Kinship Center merged with Seneca, the boards were the board was a governing board, and it was a statewide governing board. So they were very involved in supporting new programs and helping to find funding, you know, coming up with ideas, you know, to help better practice and not so much practice, but functioning of the agency and really cherishing the culture. And then after the merger, the boards became leadership boards because they were no longer a governing board. But we still have a very strong leadership board, both in Southern California and in Central Coast. And they started one in the Bay Area too, because that was not a model that Seneca had participated in. You know, they didn't think about having local leadership boards. So that they really, you know, are a voice in the community. They, you know, help volunteer at events that, you know, help us to raise money. They're connected to the development role, which again was something that was very strong within Kinship Center and not even considered at Seneca. So that made a big change at Seneca. Now there's, a stronger development component within that organization. So that merger created some innovation for the organization as a whole. And I think that, the seeds of that were from Kinship Center.
I think what strikes me when you say that is that you came into this as an agency builder, an initiator, an agency grower, at a time when there were lots and lots of little agencies in California with their own personalities and their own desires of who they would serve, et cetera. And you've been through a tremendous evolution here, not unlike what's going on around the country, as I know from your national work, where organizations have had to merge to stay afloat. Do you want to comment on that? What do you think is causing that change? Is it a good one? What are the costs and benefits of that?
Well, it's not easy. Mergers are hard.
Yeah.
Because you're not just, merging work, you're merging culture. And often there's not quite the match that you thought there was. Mm-hmm. And so somebody's the big fish and somebody's the little fish. And so it's hard. And I think the benefit is stability. And the difficulty is helping the big fish to understand that the little fish has something to offer. Okay. And gaining the respect of, being able to listen and say, yes, but we know how to do this. And so, that has happened. And there has been a much better blending of expertise. And it has allowed communities to get better services and a wider range of services because we've been able to cross-pollinate on the expertise that we've built over the years. But mergers are hard, and it changes everything. It just, everybody changes. Mm-hmm. It takes a little time, but everybody changes. So you have to be careful who you merge with.
Good advice. Very good advice. Yeah. Now, you've done this work, and really Kinship Center has always worked with some of the most needy kids, the ones with the biggest challenges, or large sibling groups, or teenagers. Not that you didn't place infants, but you really became known for your work statewide with finding permanency for some of our children who wait the longest, and worked really well with kinship families, relative caregivers. Mm-hmm. What's kept you stable? What kept you well, I guess I want to ask two questions here. First of all, why did you get into this? What brought you into this? And secondly, how were you able to stay with it? How do you balance the personal life with the hard work that you've done? What do you do when you're away from the office?
Well, first, about how did I get into it was really kind of a fluke. And you may know the story, but when I was going to college, I was thinking about, because television was new, I'm that old, and it was relatively growing, and I thought, I think that's a field I want to go into, but I ended up not majoring in sociology when I went to school, and just my mother always said I brought every bird with a broken wing home, and when I was a kid. So I guess it was kind of a natural thing for me to feel like I wanted to be in a helping profession. Unfortunately, my parents thought I should be a teacher, which was safer, but that wasn't my path. And so I worked for the welfare department, a couple of different welfare departments, one in my hometown, and then when I came to California, eventually went to work for the county in Monterey. And when I left there, Steve and I ran a coffee house, which was kind of fun, and that was itself a different kind of social work. We had the cowboy bar across the street. We had the hippies coming to the and the sheriff coming to the coffee house. So there was a lot going on.
Yeah.
But I wasn't working. We'd sold the coffee house and I was taking time off, and I was visiting a friend who had been in an car accident, and I was visiting her in rehab. And her boss, Helen Robinson, who was the director of the Children's Home Society office in Monterey, was there visiting and asked me if I could type. And I said yes. And she said, well, would you come to work for me and take Jane's place, her secretary who was in the hospital, until she's ready to come back? And I said, oh, well, okay. And so I went to work at Children's Home Society as their office secretary.
Oh, for goodness sakes, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so I did that. But then, of course, people were coming into the office and I was talking to them. And, and I eventually said, I don't really want to be the office secretary anymore. I really would like to get back to doing social work. And they said, okay. And I didn't have a master's degree, so they gave me a social work associate position. It limited what I could do. And then I went back and got my master's degree and moved into a social work position. So I was there for 13 years. And it was just by a fluke that I showed up there, but it was the seeds of a career.
Yeah.
So, I kind of fell into the world of permanency and adoption and foster care, but I had been doing some social work prior to that at the county level.
I'd never heard that story before. How interesting.
Yeah, funny. And what did I do to it? Well, the work is never ending. It's so open-ended. It's always, because it's about people. And so I've always had outside interests that had a beginning and an end. So I played tennis, played the piano, sewing, knitting, doing crafts. They all have a beginning and an end. And I always have given and reading, I've always given myself, lots of permission to do the kinds of things that I can feel like I finish.
Yeah. So you're a learner all the time.
Yeah. And the other thing is that, I guess one of the other impetus points for me was that, I had a very normal, loving, stable childhood. I had fabulous parents, and I had a good life. I was very privileged. And I remember when I was 59, I was back east, and I was having, my sister had a big 60th birthday party for me. And all my nieces and nephews were there. And my great nieces and nephews were there, and they were young at the time. And they asked me to say something. And I said, I really want to tell you how lucky you are to have this big family and to have the life that you have. And I have spent my career making sure that other children who haven't had this opportunity get to have it. And I want you to always think of that in your life as you're growing up and what you decide to do in your own life, because you have really been fortunate. And there are so many children who never have had that opportunity. And that's really why.
Wow.
That's really why I continue to do the work. And why I still feel like there's so much more to do. And if I can have a voice that helps to make some of that happen, then I'll continue to do that.
I can't remember who said this when I was young, but I just remember saying that the privilege of retirement is that you move into the obligation of mentoring and continuing to pass your knowledge along, which is why I'm so passionate about this legacy series. So with that in mind, because I love what you said, I almost wanted to say, amen, Carol. And if people aren't picking this up, I just want to say that you really are one of the most fun people. You've got a great sense of humor, and I think that's very healing in and of itself.
Oh, thank Thank you.
Yeah, it's true. But when you're no longer here, because now we're at this stage where, we're really in that older time of life. When we're no longer here, all of us has a wish that will be remembered somehow. Maybe it'll go on our gravestone or written in our obituary or whatever. There'll be a plaque at the agency. But, but what would you like people to remember about you the most?
Huh. What would I like people that I cared, and that I was interested in them, that I wanted to support them in whatever they chose to do, especially young staff and my friends. But I think mostly that I was a caring person
And that you are.
and that I had a sense of humor.
Yes. Yes. Great balance. So one more thing.
Uh-huh.
Assuming that families are watching our legacy folks, or young professionals are watching it, or people who think they might like to be social workers, future professionals, what do you want, what do you want them to take away from this interview? What final thoughts would you have for them?
Well, this is an honorable profession.
Uh-huh.
And I think what I would hope is that anybody who decides that they want to work on behalf of the benefit of others, that they feel a passion for it and that they stick with it, because it's not easy all the time. And I know people have said, things like, oh, the work you do is so wonderful. And it's hard to explain. Yes, the work is sometimes wonderful and sometimes it's heartbreaking. And sometimes you feel hopeless and sometimes you feel helpless. And yet you have to have the drive to say, there's got to be a way that we can do something about this, even if it's down the road and doesn't benefit this person, but this is wrong. And we really need to do something to fix this and to find the people who have the ability to work alongside to make things change and make things happen. But you need to be dedicated. You need to say, this is my career, this is my mission. And not say, well, I don't know, that's not working out so well for me, I think I'll just go try something else.
Mm-hmm.
Or be in it for the money, because there is no money in
it. Oh, Carol, thank you. It is always such a joy to talk with you and learn from you. And this was a delightful interview. And I thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, this was fun. And I'm anxious now to look at everybody else's legacy interviews.
There's a lot of really lovely ones up there, which I think, Graham will attest to. There's just some knock your socks off ones that's been great. And I'm searching out old and deep folks. I finally reached Lee Campbell up in the mountains in Mexico. And because she started the first research on birth parents, and she's started Cub, and I really wanted to talk with her, and she's willing.
Oh, good.
And I reached back through Michael Trout and reached Thomas Verney from The Secret Life of the Unborn Child.
Oh my goodness.
And Thomas is willing to have a conversation. So I'm reaching way back to our real legacy folks.
Wow.
And so it's going to be.
Did Maria say she was willing to do
Maria's all scheduled. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So yes, we're really are moving along, and it's very exciting. And I can't thank you and Graham. I say thank you to Graham every time, but this has just been such a delight for me. Of all the things I could be doing in my retirement, capturing the voices of our leaders to hold for, I hope that these series might run in university social work classes. I'm just really hoping that it gets used in a variety of interesting ways that folks can literally listen to the wisdom and then think about, how does that apply to me? How am I going to do that? So
Mhm.
I'm excited.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Now I'm very anxious to go look. Now that I have time, I can browse around and, read all kinds of things and
Yeah.
watch all kinds of things. So,
For me, one of the ones that I loved all of them, but you have to go look at Irene Clements, the one who started the National Foster Parent Association.
oh, no,
But
I didn't know that.
she's a Spitfire. She's our age, retired, but also continuing to work. Does this. Carol, this has been an absolute delight. I certainly see you as one of our legacy leaders, and I appreciate your very busy retirement time to do this legacy interview. And I wish you the very best all the way into the future.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure and fun.